as long as action games have existed, there have been those that have risen to the top and those that have tried to imitate the best. But it's still a huge matter of debate what really stands above, all the others as the best action game of all time. It's pretty difficult to tell because there's a lot of differentiation and a lot of imitators, but a lot of people have done these handy little tier lists, which I think were popular, a recent couple of months ago. So I found one here that I thought I'd give my views on. The only issue is I see a lot of people who do these lists, they do them up, but they're never really sure about all the games on the list. They've always played, most of them. Everyone's played the big classics, but no one's ever played, all of the action games around. And I feel like I'm dedicated or, autistic enough to go that far to just play all of them that I could. And I think, the list I've picked out here covers a lot of them. There are some that haven't actually been on this list that I would think should be on this list. Stuff like Chaos Legion. There's a few others, especially PS2 classics, which, a lot of them go unknown. Some of them might have only released in PAL regions, or some of them might be Japan exclusive. I think I've played most of them. I definitely have played all the ones on this list at least. So I thought, I'm probably somewhat qualified to give my views on it, or at least, it's something I find interesting at least to compare and contrast these, because a lot of them, you're not really ever sure when you look at it. It's strange seeing some of these and trying to rank them against each other, because no one would really compare some of these things to each other. I can see Sonic Unleashed right here is not one that I would normally call a stylish action game, but, to each their own. So there's quite a confusing mix here. So I thought I'd just go through them in the order they've got here and just talk a bit about each of them, and hopefully, put it together along the way and figure out what the top ranked of all the list here is. And I think we've already found the top rank. That doesn't need to be anything else. Final Fight Streetwise. Can it be anything other than Kino? This is the peak of action game. Sarcasm, of course, but there's a few choices here which I'd be interested to see how they stack up in my own view and how other people view them as well. So let's get right into it. Anarchy Reigns, one of Platinum's titles. It's a bit different from the usual stuff. I mean, most people would say they go with the Bayonetta sort of timed dodge or the Revengeance sort of counter attack back sort of thing, the parry counter thing. But Anarchy Reigns is a bit more multiplayer focused, I think. It had the multiplayer draw from the start, and I don't really know if that was the best idea. It's actually kind of a sequel to Mad World. It's not so connected, but it does feature some of the same characters. So, from memory, it's a good game, but it's definitely not what you call one of Platinum's greats. It's mostly fun for all the different kind of characters. They all have their own sort of skills, and there is actually a fairly decent campaign mode, even if there's a bit of like grindy, boring bullshit in there. I remember fondly playing a tiny bit of the multiplayer where pre-order or day one purchases get Bayonetta as a character. So if you like Platinum, if you're a really big Platinum fan, you probably get something out of it. If you're just looking for action games to try, it's probably worth a go if you can find it on the cheap, which you would be able to nowadays. But if you're unsure, I would probably say no. So I'm gonna put this one. I think it'll be between a B and a C. I'm gonna go B just because I'm a bit of a Platinum fan, so we'll start with that one. Asura's Wrath. It's a really weird title. I mean, it puts you off. As soon as you start the game, you're put off because if you ever look at the DLC listing, you find out the end of the game is actually DLC. The actual probably peak of the game, where it really shows off like how good it can be, and you have to pay $10 or whatever it is nowadays for it. Which is a real shame because it is a good game. The only problem is I don't know if game is the right word. I mean, people go on about how it's just a QuickTime event, a bunch of QuickTime events all strung together by cutscenes, and it is for the most part. There are a few parts where you have an actual sort of battle going on. It's mostly like boss battle sort of stuff, but there are a few, actual areas with, sort of lower enemies and that kind of thing. And it's mostly front loaded at the start of the game. And then as you go on, it gets less and less of an actual proper, full on action game. It's just sort of a series of boss battles with really nice cutscenes all strung together with some good, voice acting and so on and so forth. But it's a shame because I feel like if they'd put in more effort to have more of the actual action content, it probably would have been, a higher rank for me because that's what I was really there for. I mean, the cutscenes and everything are cool, and it's a semi-decent story. It really, that hot-blooded action kind of stuff. So that it's good, but it's just dragged down by the fact that it's, almost not even a game. It's just, an interactive movie that you occasionally play, and you may enjoy it. So I'm going to put it at a C purely because of the DLC fuckery with the last chapter. But some people might rate it highly. If you're really keen on the story, that sort of Buddhist mythology kind of thing that they've got going on, you probably rank a bit higher for you. But it's I can't really put it at the top of my list. It's got some work doing. I think something like a sequel with a bit more time and a bit more budget into it to make it really properly fleshed out would be good, but the story is pretty conclusive, so unfortunately it's just one of those weird sort of 7th gen experiments that we get. I might skip ahead because I think we got to leave some of these Kino products right here. This one, my favorite of all, and we'll skip to another Platinum game, God Hand, which is not Platinum, sorry, Clover, which is the original Platinum, I suppose. God Hand is pretty debated these days. Famously, the IGN review that gave it a 3 out of 10 back in the day. And now these days it's a pretty big cult classic. And if you're looking for action games, it had new God of War's camera before that was a thing. So it was certainly an interesting experience. It's quite difficult if you're not into action games, and I don't mean like Bayonetta difficult. I mean you're gonna get a lot of trouble, a lot of a learning curve, like most of the games made in that era, and especially those made by Platinum eventually, where it sort of is pretty easy on you at first, but eventually gets to the point where you just gotta get good basically, because otherwise it's not gonna happen. So God Hand is really good. The only issue is that it's sort of very forgotten these days, and I think some of the design of it, the fact you can build your own combos is really cool, but I feel like the game really just does it and doesn't really ever sort of try and encourage you to, it doesn't tell you how to build it correctly, or it doesn't really hold your hand at all. I mean, for some people they love that, but I think if you're a new player and you're not used to that kind of game, it's going to really cause some issues. I know it did for me at the start. And there's a bit of grindiness as well if you want to buy all the moves and that sort of thing. So definitely worth a try. If you've just played the basic, the most played, the typical action game, if you want to try something a bit more cult classic, God Hand's always a good first choice. Unfortunately, I don't think it's actually easy to find anywhere these days unless you're buying off eBay. There's no digital re-release as far as I'm concerned, but I could be wrong about that. But I still, if you can find it for a reasonable price, then definitely I would recommend. So I'm going to put this one in A, I think, because I don't think it reaches the level of great action game, but it's certainly on the way there. I mean, if you get really into the combat system, which I know a lot of people do, you could probably rate it in the S rank. But it's somewhere there, somewhere maybe in between for me. But it's been a long time since I've played it, to be fair. But the last battle it's got that classic, fight someone with the same skill as you. in like a one-on-one fight, and it's just pure action game. And it's stupid and goofy, and that's why people love it, because it doesn't take itself seriously at all. And then it's no God of War, self-righteous, amazing sort of thing. It's very down to earth and very Japanese. Speaking of God of War, this is going to be a bit of a debate here. I noticed they don't have a God of War Ascension here. I'm not sure why, but it's probably on the same level as God of War 3. It's very similar. So start with God of War 1. I think the idea of Kratos' weapons is pretty clever. The dual blades are very iconic, and they have a lot of uses in an action game. I mean, not even in just the swinging and climbing and that kind of stuff, but just as a weapon itself, you can do so much with it. And surprisingly, honestly, didn't do more with it, rather than just sort of the swing and the it's got like the wide strikes and the small strikes and that sort of thing. There's nothing beyond that, which I thought maybe they would do, but I guess it's trying to be sort of more based on the mythology area than any kind of crazy too super over the top actiony. Something cartoony. It tries to be pretty down to earth, pretty edgy, I guess, when we're talking about action games. Probably beaten only by something like Metal Gear Rising. I would say it's a fairly decent game. It's probably going to get a B rank for me. The first God of War is pretty good for a first effort on like that kind of action game. It doesn't reach the level of like Devil May Cry 1, but it is still a really good game. And very playable even these days. They've got all the HD collections, but it doesn't feel aged like some of these games do. God of War 2, I think, is definitely an improvement on that. It goes even higher into the ridiculousness. It's very similar in design. One thing I liked actually about both games is that the puzzles in them, surprisingly for this kind of game, you expect it to just be constantly action, 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 but there is actually a pretty good balance of things like puzzles and exploration and even a bit of platforming. So the second game really capitalized on what the first does, like a sequel should really. But it's probably not too far ahead in terms of compared to the first game, but I think it has to go in an A just for continuing what the first one started. And I think I'm going to go the same route with the third game, which it's had the generation jump, so that it goes full bore into those ridiculous QTE action events, like even the start with fighting Poseidon and causing the whole world to flood and everything. Regardless of what you say about God of War, that shit is just entertaining as fuck to me. I love those super over-the-top moments in a lot of these games. God of War 3 probably has the biggest amount of them, just because it realizes, oh yeah, this is the last one in the trilogy, we better just go, fucking ridiculously into this nonsense, and hopefully, it all clicks together really in a good way. So it's staying at A as well there. It's probably not as big a jump as between the first and the second game, because it has already sort of set itself up with all the extras that the second game had, the sort of improved combat and new skills and that sort of thing. And what I really like is that it continues like a minute after the end of the second game. Like if you're waiting to see this big conclusion, it's right there. So you probably had to wait, as when they were coming out, to see this finale of this story, but just being able to jump straight to it after the second game, it hypes you so much up at the end, is great. And it concludes everything pretty cleanly. Like, you don't really need anything else, even though, the PSP games and Ascension, they're all decent. But this pretty much tops it all off. I don't think you really need anything else to get added on to God of War. And then they made a fourth one. So it's a lot different. As I said before, it's got the sort of behind the back camera instead of the cinematic angles from the first bunch of games. It was honestly better than I thought it would be. I was pretty concerned going on in that it was going to be one of those games that's just a huge amount of cutscenes, unskippable, lots of walking sections. and the action's just like dulled down to like this really boring button mashy nonsense, and it's kind of that way, but it's certainly better than I expected it to be. The axe is a pretty cool weapon, how you can throw it and call it back, and it's used for fighting, it's used for puzzles, that sort of stuff. So they get a lot of use out of it, and the highlight of the game is when you get the chains back and have that nostalgia flashback to the previous games where you're flying and the chains are flying everywhere and you're fighting all these enemies at once, and it's certainly filled with a lot of cutscenes and probably more than it needs, and it's a very long game too. It's probably 20 to 30 hours, I would say, and yeah, it does actually a quite decent job of setting up a new world, a new trilogy, and I like the approach to have sort of an open world but a small one that actually uses the spaces it has. It's unfortunately pretty rare these days for that to happen, but yeah, I actually quite liked this compared to my expectations, which is not usually how it goes. It's usually the other way around. So, I actually am pretty positive about this one. I don't think it reaches the same level as these two. It definitely doesn't have the over-the-topness to quite the same degree. I mean, it certainly does a fair bit of it, but, there's no world-destroying cataclysms, but, maybe they're saving that for the sequel. So, it's going to go for a B for me, but I could easily slot it into an A, depending on the mood. I just don't think the combat is really served too well by the new camera angle. I mean, I'm sure if you've watched, a number of reviews, a lot of them point out that, the behind the back angle really causes some issues. And I feel like it's really hard to tell what's going on. It has a lot of those, enemies that try and attack you from afar, or, enemies that gank you from behind, that sort of thing. And there's not really any reason to have that. If the camera was just changed to even just like a more of a pulled back, like third person style, in the same style of like Devil May Cry, it would be the same game. There'd be no issue with it. It would just be better. You'd be able to discern more enemies much easier. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the sequels because they're obviously making at least one more. And I think it could really be something quite good if they listen to the feedback and try and build on what they've got. I think it could be actually pretty interesting, especially as the stakes ramp up and they introduce more of the sort of the Norse mythology into it. It could be pretty interesting. Okay, Kingdom Hearts, the most anime of anime games. It's a bit difficult to rate these because they do. They have their good points and their bad points. Unfortunately, the bad points is most of the game. I quite like the combat in the games, but I have to say that the cringe just from the general concept, though it works surprisingly well. You wouldn't think the Disney Square Enix kind of crossover would ever work, but I'll give it to them. They pulled it off to a pretty serviceable degree, compared to what it could have been. So yeah, the first game actually is the only one with a story that I think is actually kind of comprehensible, even if it is still ridiculous. I think it has to go in a B. Very good game, but very basic, especially these days. There's a lot of platforming. It's more of an action adventure game. Actually, no, sorry, the other way around. It's more of an RPG than the action adventure sort of full-on action that they go in the later games. It tries to have a lot of variety too, with like the platforming and a few puzzles and stuff. They got the shooter segments with the gummy ship between worlds, and just not really very thought out, very polished. I thought a lot of it was pretty sloppy, besides the actual main action bits. When it goes sort of full Square Enix near the end is where I think it gets the best. As if you're into the nostalgia bait, Disney stuff, that's fine, but it only has so much use, and it's pretty much a retread of the movies a lot of the time, which doesn't do a lot, I think, to improve on the game really, because you're just sort of meandering about and listening to dialogue worse than the actual movies. And yeah, it's a good starting point, but I think the second game does a much better job on improving on that. The story, I think it goes a little too far into ridiculousness, but The action is much improved. There's a lot of new good ideas, especially in the updated re-releases where they've got the final mix with all the extra, super bosses and extra secret bosses, that kind of thing. The first game had a few of those as well, and those were really good. But the second game has, I think, the sort of style and skill behind it to back it up. So I'm going to actually put this in S because I think it really does a good job. I mean, the problem with me is that I will probably not rate too many things in the highest rank here because I really find it hard to call stuff perfect. So I don't expect too many to be there, but S is a very good rank to have, and Kingdom Hearts 2 is very enjoyable, even if it does still fall into that trap of sort of meandering about with its story to a point where you just kind of get a bit exhausted at some point. And on that same note, Kingdom Hearts 3, which I do think is better than the first game, but still has a lot of issues which should have been solved considering it's, like actually the 7th game after all the spin-offs and that kind of thing. But yeah, I'll go with A because I actually quite enjoyed this. A lot of people say it's one of the worst ones in the series, but while the Disney Worlds definitely had an issue, I think the fact that it tied up as many plot points as it did is pretty impressive and had some kind of a conclusion. I mean, I know they're still making more games, but the whole big ending segment where there's 12 boss battles in a row, it just gets ridiculous. I love, like I was saying before, that stuff is, that's pure gold to me. And I couldn't wish for anything more. It's just a really enjoyable game, even if you just, if you can stomach the nonsense that it puts out, it's just a fun game to just mess around it. And even if you don't want to play the high tier level 1 run nonsense, you can always go and just have a sort of a fun, grindy, button mashing experience and just enjoy the cheese. That's something I've always liked. Metal Gear Rising, another one from Platinum. I do really like this game as well. It's one I was pretty unsure about when it was first announced because I know it had those development troubles originally made by Kojima's team and then put over to Platinum, and they were given something ridiculous. I think might have been even less than a year that they were given, or 18 months or something like that. And the fact it turned out as it did was really great. The only issue is that it's very short. I mean, I think on my latest run on hard mode, it would have been less than 4 hours. The fact is, though, that I don't think I've played many other games that have boss battles this good. I mean, I don't think there's really any bosses in the game that I would actually say are bad. They're all so hyped up by the ridiculous dad rock soundtrack that's just this edgy, ridiculous nonsense. And, it's a bit sacrilegious after the 4th game to sort of continue Raiden's story, but it's worth it, I think, just for how many memes have come out of it. It's pretty, I wouldn't say it's too deep on the action level, but there's enough there that you probably get a good rhythm out of it, and some of the bosses are built around the action in a good way that a lot of games I think forget about. That sure, you can have a great moveset, but if the enemies and bosses aren't actually reactive or interesting with that moveset, there's no point in playing it because, it just gets to a dull experience. You just, you style on them and you just annihilate everything. And I think it has a good balance of that and, known for some of the best bosses at the end as well. The final boss is probably one of the best final bosses in any action game in a long time. This one I'm actually going to give, I think, an A. It would be higher. The problem is yet not that much replayability, and the length of it does hurt it. And I think if it was a bit more polished, it's probably not Platinum's fault because they were given such a small time to do it and sort of just had to piece together whatever Kojima's team left behind. But if it had just a bit more behind it, if it was given like an extra 6 months to a year, it probably could have been one of the best action games ever. Even withstanding the Metal Gear license is just kind of an aside. It doesn't really factor in all that much, but just as its own thing, there's just some great ideas here, and it's a shame that it wasn't really capitalized on. So, Metal Gear Revengeance 2, when I'm still waiting. It'll never happen because Konami, but one day maybe. Nier. It's interesting choice to be put on here because it's really more of an RPG than an action game. There are a lot of action elements. I mean, that's Yoko Taro's style, to be just nonsensical and throw in as many weird genres that he can, but it's still a good game. I wouldn't rate it highly for its action, but everything else is pretty top notch. The story is great. The characters are some of the best, I think, in any game I've seen in a long time. They're all pretty simple, but something about the way they've just written the story and voice acted it. You can't help but like them, all of them. Even the weird main character that's only in the specific version and the only one the English version ever got. Apparently there's going to be some remake or re-release coming out for this. I don't think there's been any footage about that at all yet, but I'm looking forward to it because I think it's one of those sort of forgotten gems. Everyone talks about the sequel, whereas I think the first one really deserves the praise because it really did everything the sequel did first, and I think it's kind of just ignored because Platinum made the second one, so good on Access Games for making this. It's really, I think, Yoko Taro's writing that elevates it, and the music especially. I think people underrate music. I mean, going right from Metal Gear Rising to this one, the music really pushes it beyond just a simple action moment or whatever. It gives it a lot more weight and gravity that a lot of moments wouldn't have if they didn't have a soundtrack this good. It's probably my favorite soundtrack of all time, if I have to be honest. Even better than the second games, which I was hoping the second game would, override it, but I think the first one is just a little bit better, even if there are very similar in soundtracks. So it's hard to rate because I can't really give it a great score because of action. The action is fine. A lot of people hate on the action, but I think it's okay. So I'm going to give this a B. Though as an action game, between a B and a C probably would be fair, but it just has so much more that I think brings it above that level. Nier Automata, probably a better action game, but it despite being made by Platinum, it didn't really have those staples which I really like in an action game. I mean, it sort of dropped a lot of the ideas that I think were there, and you could just easily break the game. Like there's those attachments that you can attach to your character, and there's ones that that heal you every second, that heal you every time you attack, that heal you every time you use an item, even more than when you use it. It just adds up, and then the game's just pretty much broken, and that's on normal difficulty. And then you bump it up to hard, and then you can't. It just removes the lock on from the game, and you die in a couple of hits. So I haven't played around with the harder difficulties much because I've heard, it doesn't really get any better. It doesn't improve from that, and there's a lot of issues there. But it's still worthwhile playing. I think the ending E, did a lot that really deserves recognizing. I don't think any game that I've ever seen has done that. A lot of games try to go into that meta territory, and they don't really succeed. It's like, oh, the character talks to you or whatever, and that doesn't happen in here really. But the way it's depicted and all the elements that sort of come together to form the ending, which doesn't really even have anything happening in terms of a crazy action or anything. The fact it could pull that off with just some text and some little sprites and that sort of thing, it's again pretty impressive. I have to give it to the guys, whoever made Nier, along with Yoko Taro, all of the teams he's used, Platinum, whether it's Platinum or Access Games, or the teams working on the Dragon Guard games, Caviar, all of them. They do deserve some credit because despite having, zero budget, Yoko Taro gets to make these games out of some blackmail he has on Square Enix, and somehow he can turn out a decent game every time, despite whatever he says. So I do enjoy both these games, and I really hope that they do more with this series. I know Square Enix, I think, has realized that Yoko Taro is a pretty good team member, so I'm hoping that we get to see more of it, and I hope that they make a remake of the first game that doesn't remove what made it good in the first place. Okay. Ninja Gaiden Black. The eternal debate that goes between Ninja Gaiden and Devil May Cry. Which one is better? I'm not in the camp that thinks Ninja Gaiden is better, but I can definitely see why. The first game, especially, is the one that I would say is the best. It's very fast paced, and I think it doesn't hold your hand as much as a lot of other action games. Even Devil May Cry is more generous with items and tutorials and everything, whereas Ninja Gaiden really just says, if you want to be a real ninja, you gotta figure this shit out, because it's pretty unforgiving, and if you're not prepared to actually learn stuff, it's not going to end well. I mean, it's a very much like God Hand in that way, where you're sort of given a basic set of, here's how you do your attacks, here's how you dodge, and now go. It's very good in the way that it's one of those games where you actually you feel like a ninja. No, it does a good job of actually promising on the fast pace of like this action that's almost too fast for your eye to see. It's just stuff jumping all around, and all the bosses are just like ridiculously over the top and difficult, and if you're not ready to really learn the boss's patterns and really learn the best of your skills, it's going to be tough. Even on normal difficulty, it's really tough. It does have I think less depth than Devil May Cry. Tense moment listening to that. I think Devil May Cry's weapons are more inventive. Ninja Gaiden's weapons are fun, but they're still limited by their sort of reality, I suppose. I mean, Ninja Gaiden's weapons are sort of based on real weapons somewhat, whereas Devil May Cry's weapons are, the bike that splits into two, or the electric guitar that shoots bats. I think there's more possibilities for creativity and fun that way than just typical ninja shit. So definitely a great game. Would not say at all that it's not worth playing. I'm gonna go forward and give it an S rank, because I think it's one of the best in the genre. I can't really say better than that. If you're looking for that kind of style of game, like something a bit more serious and less anime, I mean, it's still fairly anime, I guess, but it's certainly something that seems to be impossible to recreate, because I think the sequel kind of misses the boat on that one. It's good, but I think it tries too hard to sort of be like, oh hey, here's that really hard action game you wanted. It's probably not harder than the first game, but it just like throws so much shit at you, and then it just goes full bore into that sort of ridiculous, look at all these weird monsters. There's like werewolves in Venice, and there's all these giant like demons here and stuff. And you just kind of like, oh, why do I have to fight this like giant worm? Like, what's going on? Why is there a dragon here now? And it's like, at least Devil May Cry can go, oh yeah, this game's just, demons are pretty crazy. And Ninja Gaiden 2, it's like, Ryu's such a boring character. He doesn't banter with the enemies. He doesn't even say anything. It's just like, oh yeah, he's a ninja. He's like, bravo on the stoic ninja interpretation, but there's just not much there to get out of it. I mean, you can probably, you can sympathize with someone like Dante or Bayonetta. They've got some charm to them, whereas Ryu's only charm is like getting every woman aroused around him and then just denying them all. So, he does the Leon S. Kennedy and then just fucks off. So bravo to him. But it really, besides, if you're not in it for the action, you're not really in it for anything, because it's, the music's not like anything special. The bosses aren't anything special. They're probably worse in this game than the first game. The graphics are decent, but nothing, mind blowing. The art design is not that special. None of the enemies, none of the bosses in it, I think, they don't hold a candle to something like Bayonetta or Devil May Cry, or even like, something like Darksiders probably has better bosses in terms of design, even with its sort of simple style. Like, there's no personality to Ninja Gaiden. I just find it rather dull. Like, the first game at least had, the excuse of being, based on the old game. So, we just have a bunch of shit here. It's like an arcade game. And the second game, I think had a chance to try and do something more. And then, any attempts it has at story just fall totally flat. So, still a good game. I'm probably going to give it probably a B. What I'm not going to give a B is Ninja Gaiden 3. It doesn't actually say here, like there's no Razor's Edge, just 3, which I never played the original 3 because I heard it was that bad, so I've only ever played Razor's Edge. But even Razor's Edge, the re-release that tried to fix the game, is still nothing too special. I mean, apparently the original game didn't it only had the one weapon, the sword, and the second re-release of it did actually add more, and they added more, the Nimpo spells and everything. So I'll give it to them for actually like adding in content, even if it probably is just recycled from the second game. But man, it's just even worse in the same regard. It again tries to have a really self-serious story, like, oh, maybe you were the monster all along, and he's just like, well, whatever. Bosses are worse. None of them, besides 1 or 2, are any good at all. It looks nice, runs well, but besides that, Itagaki, the director, I don't think I'm not sure if he was even working on 2, but he definitely didn't work on 3, and I think it does really show when there's just no vision behind it. It's just like, yep, make another ninja action game, just sort of up the resolution, up the resources a bit, and then slap it together. So I'm gonna go and give this one a D. I don't really have anything more to say about it. No More Heroes. Pretty great game. I really like Travis. Travis as a protagonist, I think, is one of the most interesting on this list. He's so unlikable that he wraps back around to being really likable as just like a crazy otaku psycho. And I think seeing the story unfold is one of the best parts about the first game. I mean, it's similar to Metal Gear Rising, where the bosses are the show here. Like, you're not in it for whatever mini missions going around. You're not in it for like the really boring open world. Suda always has great bosses, great like ridiculous style, and really great theming. And I think this is probably where no one played Killer 7, unfortunately, so this is where it started for most people, where they really got a taste of it. So it's an okay action game itself. I'm probably going to give it a B. And the second game, which has a worse story, but the gameplay, is probably about on the same level. They probably try and have too much variety with a few of the other characters who I didn't really care for so much, but I'm going to give it a B as well. I think it's still a good game. Vanquish. I did really like this game. Another Shinji Mikami joint. Again, another one of those games where the idea is really great, but it's just not capitalized on enough, and it needs a sequel desperately to try and find some semblance of, really, really making its idea work, and getting the most out of it. The speed is great. The action is pretty decent. I really like how, it's just like a cover game where you're not really supposed to take cover that much, but that's the issue really, is that the game has your jet boots and whatever on a cooldown, and that cooldown just seems to come so often because you want to be jetting around and smashing stuff and doing jump and fly kicks, but you can't, because as soon as you do a melee attack, or as soon as you use your sliding jets too much, you just have to stop and hide until they recharge. And I don't really know how you'd balance it otherwise, but it just makes everything, slow down to a halt. And I know you're probably supposed to be playing a bit better so they don't run out, but I think most people are going to have the same issue that I did, where you just kind of left going, well, it's just a first-person shooter where occasionally you can jet around, but sometimes you just have to stop and wait. The environments also are really dull. I was hoping for some more variety than just sort of grey space station. There's like a tiny area that's a forest, and that was like the most interesting part. Sadly, not really that many great bosses either, so I'm going to give it, I'll go with a B. I think it's good, but it needs a sequel to really reach anything higher than that. Beautiful Joe. I don't want to shit on Kamiya too much, but these ones really never did a lot for me. 1 or 2. I don't know if I ever actually even finished 2, because it just sort of got to the point where I was like, yeah, I think I've had enough. Like, it's got a lot of character and personality. I really like how Kamiya is obviously very, very passionate about whatever games he makes. It's clear that he put a lot of love into this. It's sort of a side-scrolling beat 'em up with a few little mechanics to do with films you can like slow down, speed up time to solve puzzles, that sort of thing. But it just can't really, I think, meet any of the quality of some of these other games here. It's serviceable, but that's about all I would really say it's got going for it. Fun little game. If you really like, it's got a charming, cheesy little story. But I think I'm going to put both of these in C. I can't argue them any higher, and I'm not that big a fan, unfortunately. Wonderful 101. I'm actually playing this at the moment with the new re-release that's just come out. I'm pretty bad at it still, but I think it's got sort of the elements of Beautiful Joe, but in a lot more entertaining way. It's uses that style, but put together in sort of a more classic Super Sentai Power Rangers kind of way that it definitely has a lot of charm as well, and there's obviously a lot of depth there that I probably am not able to find myself. It's one of those games where you play it for the first time, and your first playthrough is a tutorial, and then your second playthrough is when you sort of understand everything and it clicks, and it hasn't really done that for me yet, unfortunately. So good game. I'm going to put this in B because I think it has a lot of potential. A sequel maybe would be good to again keep the series going. Somehow Beautiful Joe 2 happened when I wouldn't think that would be popular enough to happen, but it was Kamiya's baby, I suppose. So Nightmare Before Christmas. Now it's a weird title. Nightmare Before Christmas seemed to get a lot of interesting games. There was a sort of a Metroidvania 2D styled game on I think it was the Game Boy Advance, and then this one on the PS2, which is almost like a preview of DMC3 before it came out. There's a lot of similar elements that fit into those games and to DMC4. The grabber thing you have in that, it's very similar to Nero's Arm and 4. So it's not a bad game. It has some interesting ideas. I mean, if you really like the IP, you probably find a lot of enjoyment there. But it just doesn't really have enough going for it to really rate it too highly. I'm going to give it a C. Okay game. If you're just looking to play every action game, it's fun. But not much more than that. Shinobi. A Ninja Gaiden Light on the PS2, based on an older series. This one was fun. Has an interesting mechanic of you having to sort of tee up hits to do a big sort of attack. You got to sort of time them properly. It's a bit difficult to figure out, and I think I ended up getting to the final boss, which can only be damaged by those special attacks, and then I just couldn't do it. But it is a fun game. Probably a bit simple in environments. It's very difficult, maybe even as difficult as Ninja Gaiden Black. But if you like the style, Shinobi is a cool character. He's got a big scarf. I dig it. But it's not your typical action game. It's more, fitting with, I guess, the ninja style where you have to sort of dance in and strike out and that sort of thing and dodge around. And there's a lot of style for a game that I don't think had a lot of budget. I'm going to go with a C. Pretty good, but pretty simple as well. Same for the sequel, Nightshade, which is a female ninja. Same thing again. It's very much a similar game, but there's not a lot there's not a lot more to it. It's just sort of one of those games on the PS2 that no one really knew about, but it existed, and it's not even that expensive to find or anything as far as I know. But it was okay. I don't have a whole lot more to say about it. Mad World, fun game. Probably the goriest game on the Wii. It's one of Platinum's very early games. May have even been their first, but it has an interesting idea of having the game show style and having all your attacks based on the points you're scoring for the game show. So the more creative you are with stabbing a guy and then throwing him and getting him impaled on the wall, that sort of thing. Interesting idea. I don't think there's enough that you can do to do that. Like, there's plenty of stuff in the environment you can throw them into, but the main character Jack has, he has like punches and then he's like the chainsaw arm. But there's not really any like deep combat maneuvers. You can't do some Bayonetta, twisting and weaving kind of stuff, or there's no multiple weapons. I think they missed out on an opportunity to have something like another couple of weapons you could use, like dedicated weapons that you can swap between, and use at any time to sort of make some kind of combos. It's really based on the environmental stuff, which does get repetitive quickly. The visual style is really cool, where it's only black and white with red for the blood when it comes up. But it's more of like, I think, a test run for Platinum than anything. I'm going to give it probably a B. Between a B and a C, I think is fair. Final Fight Streetwise. I'm not really sure how you would rate this. I think it would normally be put in one of these. It's not has nothing to do with the previous games. I'm not even really a Final Fight fan, but it's just weird, kind of sloppy, kind of dodgy button mashing. I think it came out pretty late in the PS2's life cycle too, something like 2005-06, and it doesn't look very good, doesn't play that well. So I'm not even sure why it's on this list, but maybe it's just for the meme. Dante's Inferno, Visceral Games, lesser title. I really like Dead Space 1 and 2, not so much 3. Dante's Inferno is just a God of War clone, but it's based on the Dante's Inferno sort of story. And it's fine. The visuals are pretty impressive, like the 7 circles of hell or 9 circles. I'm not sure whatever it is, but pretty fun game. I really like the scythe as a weapon, and I think it's used quite well. And Dante does get some interesting moves and attacks and stuff with that. Like, you get a lot of use out of just the one main weapon. And the enemy variety is actually pretty good as well. It's very edgy, but running theme. But it does a good job of setting great mood, and I think it's actually surprisingly good. A lot of people are not big fans of it, but I actually enjoyed it. I think more than you would think. So I'm going to give it a B. Star Wars Force Unleashed. I'm not sure why this is on this list. I guess it's an action game, I suppose, but it doesn't really compare to any of these other ones. I'm not sure why they have this and not the second game. The second game, I think, is faster and more actiony, whereas this one's a bit of a slower pace because it's the first one. Okay game. More in it for the Star Wars license, I guess. I mean, it's just fun to throw stormtroopers around and that stuff. But second game, probably I felt the second game was more open to just letting you like fuck around with powers and stuff, whereas the first game tried to sort of limit you on what you could do, and you can't just go around force pushing legions of guys, unfortunately. So not a bad game. It's going to be a C for me, but that's fair. Dragon's Dogma, great game by Hideaki Itsuno, who did Devil May Cry 3, 4, and 5. Surprisingly good again. It's not something you would expect to be good because I think it leaves a bad first impression. The idea of being able to climb on monsters and stuff, a la Shadow of the Colossus, is great, and I think it's used pretty well here. Like, you could have just had it, you could just climb on them and stab them, but here they have, you can cripple their wings or limbs and stuff, and there's a lot of great ideas here. I mean, it's very RPG based, like it's all sort of gear and stat based, but still actiony enough that if you're an action game fan, you'll probably get a lot out of it. I quite like this game. Some great boss battles as well. The dragon boss fight, the titular dragon, actually one of the better boss fights I think in of that gen. Good action game. So I'm gonna go and give it an A. Honestly, Yakuza 1, pretty flawed. It has a few issues by having a sort of a weird soft lock-on that I think does not help a lot. It's definitely a good base for a great series that I am a really big fan of, But the first game is a bit sloppy. The story is really where the star is at. Unfortunately, this game, you can only find it in English dubbed. So it's got some big stars. It's got, Michael Madsen. It's got Mark Hamill as Majima, but it comes off as a bit sloppy when it's all dubbed. You kind of just a bit put off. Maybe you can take it more seriously because if they're in Japanese, you don't really, can't really get the line reads down too much, and the cheesiness doesn't come through quite as well when it's dubbed. When Mark Hamill's trying to style on you with his Joker voice or whatever. So yeah, I do like this game. It's only, it may even be a C because it just is the first of its kind. Like I can't really blame it for being the Yakuza team's first title, but it's definitely a great game. I haven't played it in a long time because they're coming out pretty frequently these days, but still a great game. Yakuza 2 though, I think is really where it hit its stride. They knew what they're doing. They have a proper lock on this time. No bad dub. More moves, more styling. It just builds on the first game in a great way. We're having, there's a new city, a lot of new plot lines. There's, an actual proper plot set up, whereas opposed, I think the later games kind of flounder a bit with their plots sometimes. So I actually probably would say this is one of my favorite ones. So I'm going to give this one an A. Whoop, whoop. Yakuza 3. Most people say this is their least favorite. It's okay. It has the beach setting, which is always comfy, but the story, I think, struggles a bit. It's sort of like one of those, it's like a beach episode where nothing really of too much importance happens. It's just kind of like, oh, here's another adventure that they went on, and it was very much a test run, I think, for the Yakuza games in the modern setting. They did the first Samurai game, Kenshin, before this one. Which was the test for the new engine they were working on for this gen, for the 7th gen of consoles. Sorry, and then this was sort of the first proper, Yakuza game in the modern setting on that console. And for what it is, it's fine. I wouldn't say it's amazing or anything like that, but had some interesting ideas. I think it was the first one to have the ideas where you could see the people around town doing some weird activity, and then you could learn new moves from that, which I thought was really cool. A classic Yakuza filled with heaps of side activities like all the previous games and all the future games. So yeah, I think it's good. I'm probably going to give this one a B as well. Yakuza 4, I think, did a great job as well. Besides the big plot point that everyone talks about relating to one of the characters' supposed actions, I think Japan, and especially this kind of media where they have the big, strong, sort of very masculine man, they always have to be they always have to be sort of squeaky clean and guilt free, even though they're supposed to be criminals. They're the nice criminals. So. Yakuza 4 was good. It was the first game to have the multiple character style going on with the 4 characters in the 4 different cities, and it's ambitious for that. So I'm gonna give this one. I think I'm gonna give it an A. Somewhere between. I keep tossing up between A and B. I think for the time, I really liked what it did. Maybe it was just after Yakuza 3. I just thought it was a lot better than what was there before. Yakuza 5, which did it even better, which had 5 characters in 5 cities, which all sort of slightly connected together in a way. And I think it's, it fulfilled the promise of 4 even more, and sort of had a kind of conclusion at least, or it was at least setting up things for, what might be the ending of Kiryu's story. So yeah, I did really like this game. I wasn't too fond of Haruka's dancing styles, dance battles in the streets. They were fine, but it just got a bit tedious doing them over and over. So I'm glad it didn't drag on too much. Again, great story in all of them. 5 though, I think, especially the new character Shinada, he was a great addition to the story. So I think Yakuza 5 is going to get an A from me. Yakuza 0, which I think was the next one released. This one I think would probably be the best of the series. I think the story in Yakuza 2 is probably still a little bit better, but 0 had a bit more balanced campaign while only having the two characters who are a lot more fleshed out. It was the first game to have styles, so in the previous games, each character had their own fighting style. This game had it so both characters had 4 fighting styles each, so technically that means they had a bit more variety than the previous games, and I think it makes the characters themselves a lot more important and fleshed out than just having each one sort of having their own sort of skill set. A lot of people like this for a prequel. A lot of people say this is the best jumping in point. I disagree. I probably say start with them in release order. It's what I say for every series. But it probably is the best game if we're looking at it objectively, so I'm going to put it in S rank. I would say none of the Yakuza games are not worth playing, except maybe Dead Souls, the shooter zombie spin-off they made. Sadly, I don't think that's on this list. Very disappointing. But, all worth playing, but Yakuza Kiwami, I think, was the next one released. The problem with Yakuza Kiwami is that it's a remake of the first game, but it pretty much just copy-pasted Kiryu's style from that game and just put it into the remake of the first game, which is great, looks good, has the same general story and everything, but the problem is it's just I've played this before and it's not really any better. I mean, sure, on like a base level, yeah, it is a better game than the first one, but it's just a repeat. There's not really any new charm to it. It feels... Weirdly enough, for this series, it feels almost like a soulless kind of remake because you just kind of go, yeah, it's all right, yeah. And I think this is sort of the first game I would say is not quite up to snuff with the other ones. I guess because it doesn't really do anything new, doesn't try anything particularly outrageous. So it's going to go for a B with me. Yakuza 6 was a new title using the Dragon engine, which is the newest engine, which is very very physics based. Really was not a fan of this game. Unfortunately for the finale of Kiryu's series, I think that a lot of time and effort went into the Dragon engine and less effort going into the actual game itself. I felt the ending was really lackluster. For some reason, a lot of the characters from all the previous games that just did not appear. It was very Kiryu-centric, but then it introduced a bunch of new characters that we've never seen before, and then they're the focal point, unfortunately. And it just left me with going, the combat style is a lot more simple because again, I guess more time went into the engine possibly, but it goes back down to just one style, and it's not really very interesting. I mean, it gets slightly better as the game goes on, but you can really see. Just a lack of creativity. It's just kind of dull to play. Even the areas are just so there's not a whole lot more there. It's got it's got Kamurocho, which is in every game, but it's even smaller than all the other games. Like they hadn't even been bothered to finish half the the north side of the map. It's just unfortunate because I did really enjoy all the previous games, and I was really hoping this one would just make a perfect ending, but it didn't. But apparently Kiryu's in Yakuza 7 now, so technically his story's not over, I guess. I'm gonna give this one a C. It's still not a bad game, but it just can't measure up to the previous ones. Yakuza Kiwami 2, remake of the second game, using the same engine from 6. I think they did a better job with the style in this game than than in 6. But it still has the same issues that Kiwami 1 had. The good thing is it has the story from the better game, probably my favorite story of the series. It still, I think, doesn't match up to the original Yakuza 2. There's a lot of stuff that got cut, some side mission sub-stories, even some locations as well. I don't really see a reason why, besides, laziness or time constraints. Still not a bad game. I'm going to give it a B. But it's much more worth it to play the original. It's really unfortunate that the HD collection of 1 and 2, the remastered versions of those, isn't released in English anywhere. It's on PS3 and on Wii U, but only in Japanese. So hopefully that comes out one day. Weirdly enough, they don't have Yakuza Ishin here, which I'd say is probably one of the better ones, which is the second samurai game they made. which uses Yakuza Zero's engine and combat style with the different styles between sword and twin sword and gun and sword and that sort of thing. And that's a really fun game. I would definitely put that probably in A rank as well. Killer is Dead. More Suda51. Not a bad game. Probably one of his better action games, to be honest. I just don't think it really knew what it was trying to go for. There's only like 15 or so chapters, and half of them are just like story based, or they just have like a short boss fight. Like there's not really any like full levels. Besides a few missions, like there are some, but there's not in every mission. I just don't really know. It sort of seemed like it was almost a cliche Suda game, like it just trying to be obscure and abstract for no reason other than it could. So again, not a bad game. I'm probably going to put this in B. I do really like the art style. It's definitely not as good as No More Heroes, so probably you could drop it down to a C. I might do that actually, honestly. Legend of Korra. One of Platinum's how do we make money to make better games. They signed the deal with Activision and made a few games. Legend of Korra and Transformers Devastation. Korra's okay. It's definitely not the best one of those three. It's not the worst, but it's in the middle. I'm gonna give it a D. It's fine. But I haven't watched Korra, but it's not anything special. It's okay at most. Transformers Devastation is better. It gets a C. I don't really care for Transformers too much. It kind of has a similar style to Bayonetta, but there's a lot of variety and stuff in there, and you can tell that there was at least some passion for the IP that we're going for. Ninja Turtles, not on this list. Probably good because it probably would get an E. I was really not a fan of that game. And I mean, I don't even mind like Ninja Turtles at all, but it just didn't really do a lot. Having the 4-player thing was kind of okay, and having like the little like New York open world was alright, but having all like the moves on cooldowns, it's just a strange choice. Castlevania Lords of Shadow. A lot of people are a bit mixed on this game. I'm pretty unimpressed with it. I really hate the quick time events. That's the first thing I've got to say. The timed circle presses, that sort of thing, it's pretty lame. The game looks nice, but I think it really just is like a God of War clone with a few little bits. I'll say the presentation and voice acting is very good, having a lot of great actors. Robert Carlyle, Patrick Stewart, they do a great job, and there are some good moments, some good boss fights. I think the first half of the game really drags until you get to the actual Lords of Shadow, the first one, and then it really speeds up. So I'm not sure if they just, really wanted to pad out the start of the game for some reason, but not a bad game. I would give it a C. You're being probably too generous, but not a bad game. Darksiders 1. I actually quite like this game. I'm tempted to think it's maybe even better than the second game. The Darksiders games are strange because they're all so differently styled. There's no real consistency in any of them because they all try something new. I mean, I appreciate that, but sometimes they should just stick to a style. I mean, the first game is very, very Zelda-like, with a God of War sort of action styling on top of that. There's a lot of sort of puzzle-solving, exploration. Has a really nice comic book art style. There's a lot of pretty decent boss fights. The only bad part is the end of the game is held down by huge, grindy backtracking that you have to go back through the whole game to pick up collectibles in order to actually get to the final boss, which I think brings the whole thing down a lot. I am still going to give it a B because I quite like this game. Was for a new IP, out of nowhere, of like something no one knew about by like a team. I don't know if they'd done much action stuff before, but pretty good. Second game, I think, goes a bit more like a looter exploration kind of route. Still has a lot of action styling. A lot of people say it's, and it probably is deeper than the first game in terms of action, but I personally preferred the more Zelda sort of pick up new items that change environment and stuff, that kind of way. Whereas this game's more about using what tools you have to to do that and to keep getting new loot and getting stronger and that sort of thing. They sort of give you a lot more freedom from the start in the second game, which is great. And it's probably a longer game as well. All the Dark Souls games are actually pretty lengthy for what they are, so I'll give credit to that. It's a shame they couldn't continue with this, because Dark Souls 2, I think, definitely gets a B as well. Dark Souls 3, really, really high hopes for this when I thought, THQ had closed down, and I was like, this series had 2 great games. It would be nice to have more, because you got to complete the story. The first 2 games tell pretty much 2 sides of the same story, and the third game would be nice to bring it all together and finish it off. They decided to tell a third side of the same story again. So I'm not sure if that's just because they are hoping to make sequels. I'm sure they are, but it tries to copy a Dark Souls style. There's still a bit of that action left in there, but you just sort of are a lot slower, take a lot more damage. It really didn't work. I liked what little platforming there was, but it really, I think, missed the boat. It was almost like an early beta version or something where they just hadn't settled on a proper action style yet. Unfortunately, I'm going to give this one a C, because I think that's probably more generous than it deserves, but I think it's still an okay game. The problem is it does nothing really outstanding. It's just very generic and forgettable. Sonic Unleashed, speaking of, one of the strangest games on this list, and one of the strangest Sonic games, and that's saying something. I guess it's on this list because of the werehog sections where you turn into the werehog and you fight enemies and arena fights and stuff. Not really my thing. I actually like the daytime stages more, where you're Sonic and just boost through shit. The Sonic games I've never been crazy about, but they have their moments. Generations, I think, is probably a little better than this, just because I think the werehog kind of drags this down a bit. It gets pretty tedious after the first 1 or 2 ones. There's a lot of slow movement and those balance boards and climbing and all those kind of platforming things. It's just a bit of a drag. And the daytime stages are probably the best, like of the Boost series kind of platforming levels. They're really fast and fun, and there's a lot of trial and error, but that's kind of forgivable. But unfortunately, it's not very well balanced, and I don't know why they thought this was a good idea. Really, it probably would have been more acceptable to make it like a different character or something. Strange thing, but anyway, I'm not going to rate this one highly. It probably gets a D. It's not terrible, but I just can't stomach giving Sonic anything too high. The Bouncer, Tetsuya Nomura at his worst. I think this was before Kingdom Hearts 1, actually. So I'm not really sure what he was going for. It's a sort of a beat 'em up kind of thing with RPG elements. It's really stupid and ridiculous, like most Square Enix titles these days. I don't really think there's much going on here. If you're really into beat 'em ups, there might be something of worth, but it's sloppy. It doesn't look good. And it's just ridiculously hard. You have to sort of cheese a lot of the enemies to get anywhere. There's just not really much of worth here. It probably shouldn't be on this list, but hey, Final Fight Streetwise is, so hey. Let's put it down there with it. Spider-Man Web of Shadows. Another weird choice. I wouldn't probably have pegged it for this list, but it probably fits on this list better than most other Spider-Man games. Actually, sorry, I just realized that the Yakuza 1 is down here. It's in the wrong order. That's all right. I'll put that one in here then. Bam. Okay, Web of Shadows. Surprisingly good. I will say that it's definitely for a superhero kind of style of game. It does a lot of interesting things. It has a weird visual style that I don't think I really like. It's that sort of very, very like 2009 style where nothing looks outstanding. Everything's kind of like choppy and blocky, and all the character models are really really blurry. But I like the idea of the whole choice between good and evil. I like the fact that there's a lot of characters from the Marvel Universe in it besides just Spider-Man's usual characters. There's like Wolverine and Moon Knight and that sort of thing. And the whole thing with sort of Venom being the main villain, I think, is a good idea because I don't think a lot of games have that. He's always been one of my more liked villains of the series. So yeah, it's actually pretty good, and the action is pretty decent. It has the this draw to being able to fight in any location, so you can fight on the ground, in midair, or even on the side of buildings, while wall crawling and stuff. And it does handle that actually surprisingly well. And there's a lot of variation in there. You can easily do there's a similar thing to DMC actually, where you can pull yourself towards them or pull enemies towards you. And I think that's a great idea for something like this, to sort of keep the pace up, and it should be something that's good in a Spider-Man game to never sort of let you slow down if you don't want to, or don't. If you're good enough, you can play the whole game. just constantly in midair and doing jumps off enemies and stuff. Pretty good. I'm gonna give it probably a C. It is still a sloppy Spider-Man game, but good ideas. Zone of the Enders. Kojima has this on his resume. I don't think he actually did much. I think he did producer credit on it. The first game, good proof of concept. Pretty sloppy. The game feels a bit hampered by, obviously not a lot of experience in that kind of mech genre. But I do like the designs. They're really Egyptian-inspired art is really cool. The soundtrack is really good as well. I just don't think it quite holds up. I'm going to give it a C. Second game, a lot better, has some great action sequences, and it really builds upon what the first game had, those returning characters and that sort of thing. Really worth playing. It's bizarre that both these games were in the Zone of the Enders HD collection they released on PS3, and then they re-released the second game only as a HD re-release on PS4. Weird choice, can I just say, to leave out the first game, considering they are kind of pretty linked. But it is the better game, let's be honest. This one goes for more of an animated style, while this one's kind of just sort of CG blockiness. There's a lot more story in this one as well, and I think it definitely does a better job. Shame that there's not going to be a third game because Konami again, but still worth playing. Definitely, if you can get your hands on it, I'm going to give it an A. Onimusha 1. I did like this game. It's very much Resident Evil in samurai period time. You move very slowly. You can only move with the D-pad. It's very much a sort of blocking counter kind of game because you can block almost all attacks. I do really like the element of puzzle solving and getting new items that can sort of change things drastically, like in Resident Evil. The whole the weapons you can get that are sort of themed around different elements and stuff is a really cool idea. I don't think it's amazing. I think that's it was very early on. I think it was 2000 or maybe early 2001. Only one of the 4 to get re-released in a HD remastered version for some reason. I'm not sure why they didn't release the other ones, but maybe they're just testing the waters to see if it would be popular. Still a pretty good game. I think it probably is superseded by its sequels, but still a good game. I would give it a B. Onimusha 2, different protagonist. I really liked the way this game had its choice system, where you had 3 sort of separate party members or companions, and they would sort of all give you missions or objectives, and then as you fulfilled those, that can actually affect the story. So whichever one you're sort of aligned with will sometimes come with you on missions or help you out in missions, but it changes the story depending on which one you pick and how that story plays out. I haven't played it enough to really see if there's any big divisions in the story by doing that, but it's interesting enough that for a sequel to have this idea and still keep the same good core gameplay, it's pretty admirable. Still a pretty good game. I would give it a B as well. Onimusha 3, worth playing for time traveling John Reno. I think Jean Reno, for some reason though, only voices his French self when he goes back in time to Japan and suddenly learns to speak English through fairy magic. He's voiced by a very generic American man, which is a real shame. I'm guessing they didn't want to pay Jean Reno to voice the whole game, which makes it kind of pointless, let's be honest. Same character from the first game coming back. I do really like this game. I think it's probably better than the other ones. I'm going to give it an A. Most of the Onimusha games, I think, have a very similar gameplay style. It doesn't change and evolve too much. It just sort of improves very slightly. It keeps up the quality in that Capcom way. The fourth game is a bit different. It has, I think, 4 playable characters. It has a bit more of an RPG kind of style to it where they can all level up and get experience and buy new moves and that kind of thing. It's a much longer game as well. I think it's probably about 20 hours. It's very exhausting by the end of it, but still not a bad game. It goes more entirely DMC crazy action style, whereas the first games, I don't think, it didn't go to the point where you could do anything that wasn't really like physically possible, whereas this game, you have like characters with like transformation powers or like cutting down giant demons and stuff. I guess some of the other games had a bit like that, but this game I think goes a bit more over the top. I do really like it. I think the ending is a bit of a boss rush slog, but still pretty decent game. I'm going to give it a B as well. Okay. Fist of the North Star Lost Paradise by the same team who did Yakuza. Not a bad game. I'm not really that keen on the Fist of the North Star series. It's fine, but I'm not like a devotee with it. Pretty decent game from all I can recall. It had a driving sort of sub minigame sort of thing between areas, which is new to these games, new to the Yakuza team. It's fine. I think everything about the game really is fine. There's the style in the crazy over the top like punches you can do, but it kind of gets repetitive fairly quickly. And it's also shorter, I think, than most Yakuza games. Maybe I just didn't find any interest to do a lot of the side stuff, but it felt like it was more made to capitalize on the IP because they liked it, rather than, let's make a full-fledged, really long, detailed game here. Decent, not amazing. I'm going to give it a C. Resident Evil 6. Strange that this one is on here. I don't think Resident Evil 6 is that much more action gamey than 4 or 5. But I guess it goes a bit too over the top. A lot of contentions about Resident Evil 6. I do have fond memories of it, but every time I play it, I kind of shrug a bit. It's certainly not a bad game, but it's sort of the point in the series where people started to go, well, should we keep making these, this kind of way? Should we keep playing these games? Because it's just not even, remotely. It's more action than horror, as a lot of people would say. So, not terrible, but not something I rush out to replay. So it gets a C, mostly for its style and just being so over the top that it's just, you just kind of shake your head a bit and go, why do they really need to have a zombie T-Rex dinosaur thing? Okami, one of Clover's other games. I actually really like this game. It has one of the most unique art styles out there, but I think it leans more into the Zelda territory than action game. There is a decent amount of combat and stuff in it, but it's not something I would normally pick. I think it's more story based. Adventure game of exploration and sort of, there's more adventure than action, I suppose. It's very long as well. I'd say it's about 40 hours, which I was not expecting when I first played it. It is a nice playing, looking game. Everything's very smooth. Music is great. It's very atmospheric as well. The whole brushstroke art style is really great and very creative. And I've never seen any other game, I don't think, do anything like that. It probably goes on a bit too long. I think it sort of has 2 or 3 fake-out endings of where you think, oh, here's the final boss, and then no, it's actually the end of the first act of 4. definitely a great game if you're looking for something to sort of very similar in like a Zelda vein. I think it's a really great choice. Has a lot of charm to it. I would give it a B. Again, it's not really what you call an action game per se. Fury. I didn't really know anything about this game when I first played it, but I heard it had been getting great reviews, so I gave it a try. I do really like the style. It's just purely a boss rush with no sort of areas or enemies between it. Most of the bosses are pretty decent, but some of them aren't amazing, which, in a game purely about boss rushes, you kind of want every boss to be like a standout, really great one. And, for their credit, most of them are quite good, but a few of them falter a bit. The music is great, and I think what it does best, I think, is the fact that you have, your sword attack and you have your gun attack, and there are a few moves associated with those, but there's no new gear, there's no new abilities that you learn or anything like that. It's purely here's your moveset, go and like learn your skills with it, and that's how you get it. So, actually pretty good for what it is. I'll give it a B. It doesn't really stand out. Again, it's one of those games like a lot of the ones on this list where you want a sequel just to see what they could do with it, and hopefully maybe one day, but I doubt it. Bayonetta 1. Another one from Hideki Kamiya. I was a bit iffy on this game when I first played it. To be fair, I did play the butchered PS3 port, which is, one of the worst ports of all time, I think, just after the Silent Hill HD collection. It's quite a good game. I wouldn't play it for anything other than sort of its action and its charm. I think the story is pretty nonsensical. It has a few fun moments, but it's not something where you can get really deeply invested. I don't think Bayonetta is that deep a character. But I still think it's one of the best in the genre, definitely. I mean, for something like this to just come out of nowhere and actually sort of be a standout in the action genre, I don't know whether that's saying something that the action genre is a bit lagging these days, or that it's just it's made by someone who redefined the genre back in 2001 in the first place, so decided to do it again. I really like this game. I think I can only give it an S because I think every time I play it, I end up just really enjoying it. And the idea of being able to have different weapon sets on Bayonetta's hands and feet that can create new combos between the two is brilliant. I can't believe no other game has done something like that. Even just with two weapons in each hand or something. But it's really great. And the second game, I think, did a great job on extending that when I didn't ever expect a sequel, but it did get one. The second game probably isn't quite as good. I think it kind of lacks a bit of the creativity of the first one. A lot of the enemies, you just witch time dodge and then just hit them, whereas the first game, I think, had the enemies were a lot more carefully designed, a lot more telegraphed, but still challenging, whereas this game's kind of like, the enemies are so ridiculous, there's so much shit on screen, you just got to keep mashing dodge until eventually you succeed. Still great. I would still give this an A. Bayonetta 3, I'm still hoping that comes out sometime soon. Probably won't be for a while, but I'm hoping it can even surpass the first one, but we'll have to see. And now we get to the cream of the crop on this list. Devil May Cry 1. Pretty revolutionary when it came out, and for good reason. A lot of people say it's quite dated these days with the sort of the fixed cameras, the Resident Evil style. Of course, it was originally going to be Resident Evil 4, as everyone says when they bring it up. It seems to be, unfortunately, a bit forgotten when it comes to these sort of sets of action games, because it's sort of eclipsed by its later sequels. But I still think it holds up surprisingly well, and it still has that really classic PS2 like crunchiness. Like, it's got just like such satisfying sound effects. Like, every weapon is just fun to use, and it's a surprisingly entertaining game and very replayable as well. It's very short. You can finish it in 3 or 4 hours maybe, and it's not as goofy as the later games, but it still has a certain charm that I think really holds up. So I'm going to give it an A. What I'm not going to give an A is Devil May Cry 2. Known as one of the worst sequels of all time. I don't know how this was even possible. Every time I think about it, I just think, why didn't they just import Dante's moveset from the first game? You've got Dante, a devil hunter, just... the first game was this big story how he's avenging his family, tracking down the killer of his mother. There's a lot of gravitas there, even though it's a very simple story. Second game, Dante just gonna kill a bad guy. I guess it's just, that's the thing though. It has that weird polish of the time. Even though it's a bad game, I guess Capcom at the time had some kind of high requirements for QA testing, because it's a very polished, in quotations, game. It runs fine, and there's no issues, everything works. But maybe it was because I think back in those days they had a bit of a, you can't patch a game to fix it, so they there was some effort in there, but they had to settle with this. I don't know. There's always the story about there was originally another director before Tsuno who did all the later games in the series before he came on board. I don't know whether or not that's true, but it seems like this was the best he could to. He did the best he could to put this together. We can see by the third game that obviously it's not just him that caused this problem. I think this is going to go in a D for dull, because it's not even that bad a game. It's if you really want mindless button mashing, it's fine. It's just really boring, the most mediocre of mediocre action games you can find. Even something like The Bouncer probably is more exciting than it, even if The Bouncer is just a worse in general game. Devil May Cry 3, of course, one of the best action games of all time. Pretty much after the first game revolutionized the genre, this one came and did the same thing again. I think it's really the peak when you think of really emphasizing what action games are all about. The only issue I find is that not every weapon is perfectly useful. There's some that you just kind of go, oh yeah, well that was in the game, right? I forgot about that. But there's a few that are great. Cerberus, Agni and Rudra, that sort of thing. They're all the ones that are great are always gonna be great. Every time you go back and use them, they're always has a bunch of moves, lots of versatility in it. Introduce the style system as well that you could swap between during at checkpoints or between missions, which could really vary up how the game worked as well, and what options you had. Known for some of the best boss fights as well. Everyone, of course, talks about Virgil in sort of that progression, I think, from, just sort of being, starting on this basic level of action game competency, and then the game pushing you with Virgil, you lose to him at first, you have to work harder to be better, to fight him the next time because he gets even harder. And then by the end of the game, he's ridiculously difficult. Even on the easier difficulties, he can still be pretty challenging. So it's really one of those games that, it pushed you to get better, and it wanted you to get better. It's not like, this Dark Souls meme where, it's so hard, it just, it enjoys causing you pain. No, Devil May Cry as a whole series wants you to be the best. It wants you to style and learn and to get those S ranks, because it knows you can if only you learn its patterns and try. DMC 3, I gotta give it an S. DMC 4, a lot of contention about this. Nero is an interesting new character for new players. I think he does a good job of introducing everyone to the genre, but it's probably a bit too simple. He doesn't really have anything that really stands out. And there's the big issue, of course. Dante is great when he comes back, and he's still got a lot of the similar weapons, still got the styles from the previous games, which you can now swap between in real time, which is great. The problem is he just replays all the levels backwards, which has a bit of a problem. On replays, it just gets so tedious, and there's also no new bosses, so you fight the same bosses 3 or 4 times, in a playthrough, and it starts to really drag on you. Even with the special edition, which gives you the Virgil, Lady, and Trish as playable, that only really exacerbates the issue and makes it worse by doing it over and over again. Like Virgil goes to halfway point in the game, then goes backwards. It's just ridiculous. Still a pretty good game for introducing people to the series, and for the time it looked and ran great. So I'm gonna give it an A. DMC Devil May Cry, not made by the standard Capcom team, made by Ninja Theory at Capcom's request, I suppose, to try and hip up the game. I've talked a lot about games in this list who are very edgy, but I think DMC takes the cake. Just for how hard it tries to be really mature and cool and have a deep message. That being said, it does actually have half decent combat and everything. Considering, I wasn't that big fan of most of the Ninja Theory's games. Like Heavenly Sword was okay. That Enslaved Journey to the West was okay, but none of them really are proper action games. Again, they're more that sort of, well, Heavenly Sword is, but that Enslaved is more of a platformer adventure sort of thing. So this was actually okay. I can only recommend the definitive edition because the original, is a bit sloppy. Only 30 FPS. There's no lock on. Virgil has a fedora. Crimes Against Humanity. All 3. So I'm going to give this. It's tough. I'm going to give it a B. I think. I find the story pretty reprehensible, but the gameplay is actually okay. Especially with the definitive version, it's not bad. And it's it has some interesting ideas which I think the series has learned from, and were actually good ideas to implement some of the style stuff. I think the switching between the demon and angel weapons, while a bit clunky, it was a good idea as well. You could just sort of swap between them immediately, switch between them. You do the grab and pull, or you pull the enemy towards you, or you drag yourself towards them. Good ideas. Thankfully, we'll never really see a sequel to this. So interesting experiment. But I don't like the fact that it kept the series waiting so long. Speaking of, almost 10 years since the 4th game, and we reach this bad boy over here. Devil May Cry 5 is probably as close as I can think to, exactly what I would want in an action game. Like, it ran flawlessly, it capitalized on what the previous games all had, and it really knew how to push the boundaries. Like, when my hype was pretty ridiculous for this one. I don't think it was a 10 out of 10. I think it could have done a few things more. Playing Virgil and Dante is both pretty fun. Dante is probably the best Dante's ever been. The new character, V, is good, but I think he probably could have been better with a bit more skills, skills to him, and a bit more variety in what he had. Nero, they've added the Devil Breakers, the arms that he can use, which have new skills and abilities, which is a great idea for Nero. And I'm still kind of waiting for him to get like another new proper weapon. So maybe that'll come around eventually. But he still does a pretty good job on his own, and he's a good character to sort of start the game off with and sort of get used to how it works now. Whereas Dante, I said about DMC3 how some of the weapons here are kind of forgettable. Dante and DMC5, I don't think any of his weapons are bad. I think they all have the use. They're all really fun to use. Everything really to do with Dante that I'm very keen on in this game, which is a shame because you can't replay missions with any character. You have to only play the characters in the set missions. So you can't play the whole game as Dante, unfortunately, which I would love to do. Yeah, it just had so many great moments, like the whole big thing with Virgil returning, the final fight, very similar to the final fight of DMC3, and the fact that they just put so much effort into every little detail is just great. Like how Nero gets his devil trigger at the end, and then you start a new game or you continue, replay missions, and Nero just has all these extra moves suddenly, all new stuff to buy, new skills, like new ways to play. And this is like post-game stuff, which I don't think most action games would ever do. It really gave me pretty much everything I could want from an action game. The only thing, unfortunately, is that it's only, a DMC game with 20 missions. It's not something you can play endlessly forever. I mean, I know some people are really keen on, replaying stuff over and over, but for me, I think it could have been just a little bit longer, just have a little bit more content. Some of the environments do get a bit repetitive in the second half of the game, and I was really hoping for a bit more variety in areas, like something like return to a similar Gothic architecture from the first game would be really nice, or some more diverse, like foresty areas or that sort of thing. There's sort of just like Grey City, sewers, and then the sort of the demon plant roots sort of tree thing, and that's about it. Unfortunately, I just it says something when you say the worst thing you can say about a game is that you want more of it, that you didn't get enough, and that you want a new sequel immediately. So that's something I really hope we do get, because I think I'm going to give this bad boy Smoke and Sexy style here, because come on, can you really blame me? Yeah, so that's my list. You could probably swap a few or here or there, but that's pretty much what I think of these games. None of these I would say are terrible games, except maybe some of these ones. But it's all pretty debatable. I just think that there are so many games over the last couple of generations that people really overlook. I mean, even this list missed out a few there. There's still a few great games out there that aren't on this list. And I really, if you really enjoy this genre and you want to experience more of it, then I really encourage you to go out and look. Just find like every little scrap of it you can, because I think if you get into this genre, you probably are that kind of person who just wants more and more and see all these great ideas. I mean, that's the best part about this genre, is that they're not all clones of each other. Every game on this list tries new things and tries to differentiate itself from each other. There's new styles and weapons and ideas here, which is the main thing. Like even the worst on this list, you can say, well, at least they tried something new or something different, even if it didn't always work out. So yeah, that's where I'd go with that. I do actually intend to do videos like separately on some of this stuff, a great majority of the stuff eventually. So hopefully I can talk in more detail about all of these, rather than just this small little look here. So yeah, hopefully this might have given you a bit of a better idea on some of these games. But anyway, thanks for listening. Bye.